A desperate father stood over a cradle, already familiar with grief. God turned away. The devil demanded a price. But death offered something colder: fairness. In choosing him, the man sealed his child's fate before it ever drew breath. Tonight, we step into a tale where life burns briefly and death always keeps count. The child was born into hunger, and hunger had already buried his brothers. Each small grave behind the cottage stood as proof that prayers had failed this household before. When the man looked down at the newborn, he did not see hope. He saw a life already being measured by forces he could not see. Desperate, he went out into the road and swore he would accept the first being who offered to stand as godfather to his son. The first to appear was God himself, radiant and commanding, promising blessing and favor. But the man, hardened by loss, refused. He had seen the rich thrive and the poor rot beneath heaven's gaze. Divine mercy, he believed, was unevenly given. The second figure emerged from the shadows with honeyed words and sharp intent. The devil, offering wealth and pleasure in exchange for loyalty. That bargain, too, was rejected. The man had buried too many children to trust a promise that smelled of rot beneath its sweetness. Then came the third visitor, death. He did not glow or leer. He stood plain and still, voice calm as extinguished fire. He offered no riches, no favor, only fairness. Kings and beggars alike, he said, met the same end in his hands. No exceptions, no cruelty, no mercy. The man accepted at once. Years passed, and the child grew strong. When illness struck him down, death returned. Not as an executioner, but as a teacher. He led the boy to a hidden cavern where countless candles burned, each flame a human life. Some blazed tall and steady, others guttered low, trembling at the slightest breath. This, death said, is the truth of the world. And with that knowledge, the boy stepped into a path where healing and doom would forever share the same shadow. The lesson death offered was not gentle. In the cavern, the air was thick with wax and smoke, heavy with the quiet weight of endings waiting their turn. The boy stared as death lifted a single candle, its flame thin and wavering, and spoke with neither sorrow nor threat. When the flame burns at the head of a bed, the patient will live. When it burns at the feet, the end is near. And if it is already dying, there is nothing even I can change. The bargain was sealed without ceremony. The boy would become a healer greater than any physician alive, but only if he obeyed death without question. No No tricks, no pleas, no mercy beyond what was permitted. The warning lingered longer than the words. Disobedience would be noticed. Soon, the boy's name spread across the countryside. He arrived at sickbeds like a quiet omen, eyes drifting not to the suffering body, but to the unseen flame only he could sense. When the candle stood tall at the head, his remedies worked with uncanny precision. Fevers broke, lungs cleared, wounds closed, as if time itself had been persuaded to pause. But when the flame burned at the feet, he did nothing. Families begged, coins were offered, tears soaked the floorboards. Still, he turned away, leaving behind anger, fear, and whispers that his gift was cruel rather than kind. They did not understand that survival was not his decision to make. Then the call came from the highest walls in the land. The king lay dying. The healer entered the chamber and saw the truth immediately. The flame burned low at the feet. Death stood nearby, unseen by all but him, silent and waiting. The boy hesitated. For the first time, compassion pressed harder than obedience. And in that moment, the fragile order between life and death began to fracture. The king's chamber was heavy with incense and fear. Courtiers whispered along the walls, their faces pale as the man they served. Gold and velvet surrounded the bed, yet none of it mattered. Not to the candle, and not to death. The flame burned low at the king's feet, its light thinning, ready to vanish. Death stood at the bedside, still and patient. The healer felt the weight of 100 watching eyes and the promise of a future he had never been allowed to imagine. Power, safety, a life free from hunger. All of it hovered within reach. And so, with trembling resolve, he acted. He turned the king's body so that the flame now stood at the head. For a breathless moment, the world held still. Then the candle flared, bright and renewed. The king inhaled sharply, color flooding back into his skin, as though death itself had been dragged backward. The chamber erupted in cries of praise and disbelief. Only death did not move. His gaze lingered on the healer, hollow and unreadable. No anger, no outrage, only acknowledgement. The warning had been seen, the boundary crossed. Reward followed swiftly. The healer was showered with gold, given fine clothes, honored as a miracle worker. His name echoed through halls once closed to men like him. Yet beneath the celebration, something had shifted. The healer felt it in the quiet moments, in the way shadows seemed to stretch when he passed, in the faint smell of smoke that clung to him even in open air. Death returned that night. He did not punish. He did not threaten. He simply reminded the healer of the rule and of how few candles still burned long enough to matter. One betrayal, he said, could be forgiven. A second would not be met with patience. The healer nodded, swearing obedience. But fear had tasted power now. And power, once tasted, rarely leaves without taking something in return. Time passed, and the healer's reputation hardened into legend. People no longer asked if he could save the dying. They demanded that he do it. And then came the summons that would test him beyond reason. The king's daughter lay fading, breath shallow, skin cold, her life slipping faster than any plea could follow. When the healer entered her chamber, his heart faltered. This was not ambition. This was attachment. He had grown alongside her in the palace halls, watched her kindness ripple through servants and strangers alike. And now, as his eyes searched for the candle, dread settled in his chest. It burned at her feet. Death stood closer this time, presence thick as silence after a scream. There was no warning spoken. None was needed. The healer already knew the cost. Desperation drove him to cunning. He pretended to trip, overturning the bed in a clatter of silk and wood, rolling the princess so that her head fell where her feet had been. In the chaos, the candle's place was changed. The flame surged. Life returned in a rush of breath and color, and the room erupted in relief. Servants wept. Bells rang. The kingdom rejoiced. But death did not disappear. That night, he led the healer back to the cavern. Inside, the candles seemed fewer. The darkness between them deeper. Death gestured silently, and the healer saw it. His own candle, shortened to a fragile stub, flame trembling, already near surrender. This was the second, Death said calmly. The healer fell to his knees, begging, promising, bargaining with words that once would have meant nothing to him. Death listened, unmoved. Mercy had already been spent. And still, the flame burned, just long enough to walk toward the end he had earned. The healer's fame had reached far beyond the village, but the world he had shaped with skill and cunning now felt brittle, like glass held too tightly. Whispers of his defiance traveled faster than wind. Those who coveted life, wealth, or power saw opportunity where he saw obligation. And so it came. A nobleman, blinded by greed, sought to deceive the rules death had set. offering bribes and threats to bend fate once more. The healer hesitated, heart pounding, as the noble's daughter fell ill. The candle burned low at her feet, life teetering. Every instinct urged him to save her, to tip the scales again as he had before. But the memory of death's silent warning burned hotter than fear. Obedience was no longer abstract. It was survival. He chose to step back. The nobleman raged, swearing vengeance. But death's hand moved quietly in the shadows. One by one, the candles of those who defied the natural order guttered out, their brief flames extinguished by unseen will. The healer understood at last. No art, no cunning, no wealth could overcome the balance that death maintained. Life was fragile. Mercy had limits. And every act of interference carried consequences. Years later, the healer grew old. His hands trembled not from age, but from the weight of what he had witnessed. He had saved countless lives, yet the memory of the ones he could not save lingered like smoke in a closed room. Death visited often, calm as always, reminding him that fairness comes at a price none can evade. And when the healer finally lay down, his own candle's flame extinguished quietly. He understood. He had been both witness and participant in a story older than kings, a story in which no human could cheat the inevitable. The world went on. Lives flickered and vanished as death watched, impartial and eternal, counting each one without favor. We have followed a tale where life and death are measured with cold precision, where mercy is a gift, and defiance comes at a price no mortal can escape. The healer lived between two worlds, guided by death's impartial hand, saving lives, yet learning the unbearable weight of those he could not. Power, skill, and compassion were all tested, and every choice left its mark on the fragile thread of existence. This is a story that lingers in the mind long after the candles have burned. A grim reminder that no wealth, no cunning, no plea can bend the rules that govern all living things. Death does not boast, does not hesitate, and never forgets. It watches quietly, waiting, impartial, eternal. If the pull of darkness and the lessons of fate held your attention, like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more chilling stories and forgotten legends from the past and present. And as always, don't forget to look beyond the fog.